I'm over the moon to be able to confirm that we have now reached enough tickets in my brand new PS5 raffle that I can now guarantee that whoever wins is 100% getting that PS5 console. No cash alternative is needed anymore, which is fantastic, and although I don't know where the winner's going to live yet, so I can't say for sure how much it's going to cost me on shipping, I will cover the cost of shipping no matter where it is in the world. So if you were waiting to guarantee that prize before you entered, now is the time. There are only about 11 days left on the competition, ending Christmas Eve. It's potentially a brand new PS5 for the price of a cup of coffee, and for those who maybe think that the chances of winning aren't very good, technically, because my raffle is so much smaller, your chances of winning compared to most other raffles are actually many, many times higher. So if you are interested, check out the link right below in the description. Many of you who have followed my reviews within the Gran Turismo series for years at this point will know that I adore vintage cars, and I adore classic cars, and on some occasions even antique cars. But the problem is, most racing games kind of strangely justifiably don't really feature them much, and it's understandable why they don't. As cool as they are, as historically important as they are, they're not as exciting for the majority of players. They have to pay sometimes probably expensive licenses to get them in the game. For cars which always have to cost more, they're not as quick, they don't handle as well, and they're not as useful. So it just doesn't really make sense for most games to have many vintage cars. That is a shame though, because so many of them are such cool pieces of automotive history and automotive royalty. Now, in the past of Gran Turismo, they've done a decent job of having a handful in here and there. The Ford Model T, the Patent Motor Wagon, Daimler Motor Carriage, even the Auto Union Streamliner, which is one of the quickest vintage cars we ever had. But of late, many of those have gone away, and cars like this stand out even more. The 1929 Mercedes S Barker Tourer. Now, this is a vehicle I've wanted to review from day one in the game. There were other things that came first, other expenses, if you will, that I had to pay credits on before I got to this one, and at currently at least 13 million credits, its current value in the Hagerty Collection, when it comes around every so often, it is a major investment for a lot of players. If you grind non-stop, day in, day out, then sure, you probably have the car, but I would wager that a lot of players, maybe even you watching this, might not have bothered buying it yet. And further to that, you might actually like to, but you might not want to risk that kind of price on something from 1929 which might handle like a boat and you may never use again. And that, of course, is where my reviews come in. I buy these cars on some occasions so you don't have to. So what does this actually offer? Is it a boat, or is it actually maybe something of a useful machine? Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I will definitely say that as far as the Hagerty cars go, this definitely leans more toward the collector side than it does to the racing side. It's not to say that you can't tune it and make it surprisingly good, actually, and certainly quicker than you might think, but it is not pound for pound the best investment in terms of racing from the legendary dealer. And to highlight that a little bit more, the point level is, as you would assume, not very high at all, and doubtless this will change in future because updates tend to change this, but at the time of making this video it sits at just under 350 points. So it's super low on points, but that could be an advantage because get this, despite being what looks like kind of a German Jay Leno tank car, it's a pretty big looking machine, this car is not heavy. In fact, it probably weighs about a literal ton less than what you'd think. This is a 1,270 kilo car. That's pretty damn impressive. Now the payoff, of course, is that it's not all that powerful. 177 horsepower straight off the bat was of course impressive in 1929, but not so much in the world of Gran Turismo. Now when you fully tune it, as I have with mine, you can get way more power out of it than that. It's not a Bugatti by any stretch, but still a lot more. And as I said, it actually is quite quick. Now fully tuned, it still sits at way less than 700 points on racing tyres. So you could even, if you wanted to really give yourself a challenge, use this on like a Le Mans cash cow event. You actually can use it. Now it's not the quickest thing around, and flat out you're looking at about 150, 160-ish miles an hour. Again, not bad at all for a 1929 car, but it kind of puts things into perspective because, again, pound for pound, credit for credit, horsepower for credit, you are paying a whole lot of money for every horsepower that this has. So if you are buying cars within GT7 as tools first, something that can pay for itself and that you'll end up using hopefully a lot and enjoying a lot and winning a lot of races with, then I would go out on a limb and say this probably isn't a car that you need to be prioritizing. If you've already bought everything else that you want and you just want to blow some cash on something, then absolutely, this car has tons of charm. It's, as you can kind of tell, a pretty nice canvas to paint on. You can paint the majority of the body on it, which I was curious about because sometimes you can't on vehicles which are a bit of a weird shape. But you could potentially make yourself a nice like old bomber replica or turn it into like a wooded out boat. You could have some really cool replicas based on this thing. Now to get to the thing which you're probably wondering about the most, well, it is exactly that. The handling. What is the steering, the handling, the personality, the manners? What does this feel like? Because it could feel like the worst thing you've ever driven, or it could be really cool and really good to work with. Well, stock, you're basically driving a car that, well, it feels like a 170 horsepower piece of wood. It turns corners, it brakes, it goes, just about, but again, nothing to write home about. I wouldn't say it's bad in any particular way, it's just not particularly amazing in any way either, it just kind of is. Which isn't bad, because that's a relatively blank canvas to work from. At least you don't have to correct it being awful, for example. Now when you tune it, the only real downside is that it's, as you would probably guess, quite a tail-happy car. Which again, when you tune it, isn't too surprising given how light it is to begin with and how much lighter you can make it, more like a ton, with something like I think 370 horsepower, I want to say, maybe even more off the top of my head, which for a car of its age and weight is an astronomical level of power. I mean, it's not quite an Auto Union Streamliner, but it's not far off in road-going terms. This would have been like a Koenigsegg if it had that much power at the time. Now, overall, my thoughts are exactly what I said earlier on. To summarise, it is not an essential purchase for the majority of players, but I am glad that I bought this one. I think it is a very cool piece of history to add to the game. I really do wish that we had more vintage and antique cars, even if they were only returning faces. And as crazy as this sounds, I would honestly, happily pay 20 million credits to have a Daimler motor carriage or a patent motor wagon from 1886 back in the game. To buy it in the game for 20 million credits, I would do that in a heartbeat, and it is a literally useless car that does like 2 miles an hour at best, takes about I think 2.5 hours, 3 hours to do a lap of the Nürburgring, but I just love it because it's a novelty, it's totally different. It's like the Nike One, the Moon Rover in GT6, the Jay Leno tank car, these cars which are just unapologetically completely oddball. They're not necessary, but I'm so glad that they're in there because it's just that bit of flair which I've always enjoyed about Gran Turismo. So those are my thoughts on the S Barca Tourer. If you've driven it or owned one yourself in the game, tell me your thoughts down below. Do you think it's a great car, a hidden gem, or something that people don't need to buy? For those of you who are interested in winning that now confirmed brand new PS5 anywhere in the world for the price of a cup of coffee, then like I said, check out the link below. And aside from that, I'll see you next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.